That is Alberta's Premier Danielle Smith. So what's next in the war of words between herself and BC's Premier David Eby? Let's bring back our front bench, Dan Moulton, Shakir Chambers, and Laura Stone. They were listening in. Shakir, I'll start with you on this one. Man, this thing really ramped up over the last 10 days. Like, David Eby was almost shaking today. Danielle Smith is calling him un-Canadian. Like, what is behind this, do you think, from a political perspective?
I think they both have to play to their constituencies. I mean, as Premier Smith said, in Alberta, there's obviously a big constituency that wants to see oil and gas moved from that province to Tidewater to get to Asia and get to other countries. And I think Premier Eby obviously has a larger, in my view, a larger environmental constituency. He doesn't want to see pipelines go through his province. But to Danielle Smith's point, I mean, it's not really up to Premier Eby whether or not this happens. Prime Minister Carney is going to have a tough decision. And I think for him, the politics of what he has to do if he's agreeing on that pipeline might have severe consequences. I think for him, I mean, it's okay for Smith to put forward this proposal, present this business case, and see what happens next. But for the pipeline to actually be viable, it's going to take private sector investment. And I gather from what Premier Smith is saying, to get that private sector investment, you're going to have to change a lot of regulations around the oil and gas emissions cap, Bill C-69, and a lot of other things. And I think for Prime Minister Carney, it's really going to alienate a part of his base that supports his party quite significantly in elections and whatnot. So we'll see if he's willing to take that step. The one thing I would say is he's shown himself to be a very pragmatic individual. I'll give him credit on that. Where we had Prime Minister Trudeau, who said, there's no business case for LNG to get to Europe. Carney comes in with Minister Hodgson, and they have a business case to kind of make that happen, very forceful in that way as well. So I think if Premier Smith can put forward a case, show the numbers make sense, and get the investment behind the project, I do think Prime Minister Carney would be a pragmatic person and kind of move forward and advance that, despite the political consequences he will suffer from doing that.
There are a lot of politics, though, involved in this, and you can see just from the rhetoric that's being employed, Laura, by both of the premiers. Premier Smith also put like this very distinct timeline on everything. She expects an answer from the Prime Minister basically in about 6 weeks. What kind of a political headache do you think that will be for him?
Thinking like
you're
this
on
isn't
mute.
Oh,
there you are. Sorry, start again. Thank you.
Yeah. When I was watching your interview, Vashti, I thought, like, this is a literal nightmare for Mark Carney to navigate this. And we had all kind of talked about it in when the major projects idea was first getting off the ground of the provinces sort of eating each other, trying to gain access to the top of the list, trying to pitch their top projects for their own jurisdictions. And we're sort of watching it unfold in real time. I think this conflict was obviously a slow burn. I mean, the idea of a pipeline had been discussed prior to the initial list being unveiled. And, Eby tried to sort of wave it off as not realistic in the moment. Obviously, he's seized with this idea of Danielle Smith and some companies kind of pitching their own idea, and she obviously wants the regulatory environment to change. I think it's quite notable that for now, the Alberta Premier's ire is not directed at Prime Minister Carney. It's directed at David Eby. So obviously, there's been some hope given to her in her province on the federal level that this could possibly happen, and that this grand bargain that we all heard about in the summer in Saskatoon could actually come to the fore. So it's going to be very difficult, but we also know that the Prime Minister doesn't want a project to go ahead against against what a province has, against what a province wants, right? They have a veto literally in their own jurisdiction, it seems. So I don't know how he's going to navigate this tricky one. I think it's possible that the public will is right now siding more with Danielle Smith than with David Eby in terms of getting these kinds of projects off the ground, and that could potentially cushion the Prime Minister when he makes this final decision.
Sounds like an easy couple of weeks ahead for the Prime Minister. Dan, what do you think is politically at play here behind the scenes that might inform how he navigates it, again, from a strategic perspective?
Yeah, so I'd say, first of all, we have the topic of our first segment, which is everything going on in D.C. today and the conversation with the U.S. president, which is obviously the focus of the government. They were elected to deal with this issue, and that is going to continue to be their focus. I think some progress there will help facilitate his ability in the domestic political environment to navigate some of these really tricky domestic challenges between provincial premiers, particularly when it comes to energy infrastructure. I think on the major projects front, we've seen a great deal of communication from the government over the summer months since they were first elected about the need to get big things built in this country, to show the world that Canada is open for business and that this is a good place to invest. They've been smart and wise, I think, so far to include major projects that are a lot less politically sensitive than the one Danielle Smith is trying to advance here, to hang in the window some demonstration of that. And as they continue to roll out those major projects, I saw in your interview the Premier talk about another set that may be coming out this fall. I think we'll probably start to see some more of those trickier political projects. But as Laura points out, I think the Canadian public sentiment is on the side of the Prime Minister on this one. I think that there's a need to demonstrate our ability as a country to do big things, to make big investments like these ones. And so I do think there's an appetite out there where there may not have been in past cycles for projects like this one.
We shall see. Thanks, guys. Appreciate the discussion. Our front bench, Dan Moulton, Shakir Chambers, and Laura Stone.